Okay, I'm ready to begin. Thank you.
Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready to start, Councillor Hodgson. Thank you.
Right. Good morning, everybody. My name's Adrian Hutton. I'm councillor and I've been appointed as chair of this panel this morning. Could I ask the other councillors to introduce themselves, please?
Councillor Julie Sloman from Norbrec Ward.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Gary Coleman, councillor for Brunswick Ward.
Can I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, please?
Hi, good morning. I'm Sarah Chadwick from Democratic Governance. I'll be taking the minutes this morning.
I'm Sharon Davis from Legal Services.
My name's Lee Petrak, Trading Standards and Licensing Manager.
Just for the record, could you introduce yourself, Mr. Diamond, Mr. Daly?
Mr. Diamond, owner of the Coastal Bay Hotel in Blackpool.
Good morning, Oisin Daly, acting on behalf of the applicant.
And we've also got Mr. Smith from Millwood Facilities, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Right. Said we've appointed me as the chair. So agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members of the panel have any declaration of interest, please?
None, Chair.
Okay. I've forgotten. Does Mr. Petrak go first?
The
No, it's
applicant goes first, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry?
Chair, the applicant goes first, Chair.
The applicant. I can never remember which way around these go. Right. So it will be the applicant to go first. And we've agreed that we will allow 20 minutes for the presentation from each party. So you will have 20 minutes, either Mr. Diamond or Mr. Daly, to present your case. Mr. Petrak can raise any questions that he wants to on your presentation, as can members of the committee. Then it will be Mr. Petrak's opportunity to explain why he's objecting to this application. You will then have opportunity to ask questions or anything that Mr. Petrak has said, as will members of the panel. You will then be given, each party will be given 5 minutes to sum up without presenting any new evidence. And then once that's concluded, we will ask you to leave the meeting. The councillors will discuss it, come to a decision, and you will be notified within 5 working days. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Mr. Daly, are you presenting the case?
Good morning, Chair. I will start and I'll introduce Mr. Smith and Mr. Diamond, if that's okay.
Yeah, carry on then.
Thank you. So there is a considerable amount of detail within the agenda, which I'm sure you've all had the pleasure of reading through. And I think what we really need to boil this down to is the issue concerning the prohibition notice from the fire department. The premises itself, Mr. Diamond has had control of for a number of years. And you will have seen from Mr. Petrak's representations that there were issues in the past. There's no denying there were issues in the past. However, in mitigation, Mr. Diamond, who will speak a little bit about it, at the time was going through a hard time, and he will clearly admit that his focus was not on the premises. Since then, there's been a considerable investment in the premises. The aim for Mr. Diamond to have the premises license is to restore the hotel in some shape to the way a traditional hotel would be. Without the premises license, the hotel is in danger of falling into disrepair again, not being used correctly, or having the issue of, as you've probably seen around Blackpool and various other seaside resorts, is that hotels are being converted into houses of multiple occupation and not really traditionally what you would want to see from a hotel. I did email Mr. Petrak on the 13th of September about whether or not he would consider a condition being added to the premises license. Let me get that email up. And it was to have a condition along the lines of no licensable activity should be carried out at the premises until the Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service and Blackpool Council Health and Safety Department have certified to the licensing authority that the premises is compliant with relevant legislation. We had hoped to have had the prohibition notice lifted at this point. However, it's not quite there. The visit hasn't been arranged. So unfortunately, you will be asked to make a decision on this application without that prohibition notice being lifted. That condition that I read out there may in some way appease any fears you may have that the premises would act or carry out licensable activity with that prohibition notice still in place. There is no intention of Mr. Diamond to do so. He fully admits and is aware of the mistakes he made in the past and has got no intentions of repeating them again. Another condition which may assist in your decision making is another one along the lines of an independent fire safety and health and safety consultant or consultants shall be employed by the premises license holder with an annual report and interim inspections carried out. Myself and Mr. Diamond, both in a previous life, worked for a company called Mitchells and Butlers, big national chain. And we were both aware that when you work for those big chains, you are responsible for all the different areas of health and safety, fire safety, food safety. But what you do have with those companies is departments within those companies that will advise you accordingly. So what Mr. Diamond has realised is that he does need that expert advice and will need that expert advice going forward into the future and continuing on. If you don't mind, Chair, I'd like to introduce Ian Smith, who can give you a little bit more detail on where we are with the prohibition notice and what works have been carried out and need to be carried out.
Hello, right. So I've basically been employed to write the fire risk assessment quite some time ago, going back. There was significant findings within that, which was reflected within the prohibition notice as well. So it sort of married up. I mean, ultimately, fire safety is fire safety, so we all spot the same things. So to date, Alan's done a significant amount of works relating to stratigraphy compliance, fixed wiring tests, improvements on fire doors, compartmentation issues within the cellar area. So when I revisit the fire risk assessment, what I'm tasked to do then is obviously take out the things that have been done, following a survey of them to make sure that they are compliant and inspection of the necessary documentation to ensure that the contractors that have done the work, they are competent in order to do it. So I'm quite happy with the standard of work that have been done and the relevant documentation for installation of various bits, so the fixed wiring test and the remedial works within that. So the test has been done. What we've done is a rolling program of a 20% test of the building and completed all the necessary remedial works. So what we'll be doing moving forward is another 20% test, and then within the 5 years we'll have completely tested and remediated all the building, which brings us to a compliant level. In order to get the prohibition notice lifted, what we need to do then is put various management structure in and how we're actually going to do the day-to-day running of it. So currently, what we're looking to do is get all that management documentation in place. At the moment, taking out all the statutory compliance, we've managed to lower the risk rating. The software that you use, it uses an algorithm, so that's based on what I perceive the risk rating of the various outstanding actions are. So historically we had it down as intolerable risk, and the Fire Authority have said that at the moment the prohibition order will not be lifted unless we can get it to a tolerable risk. So where we're at the moment, we've managed to lower it to a moderate risk. In order to get it down to the tolerable risk required, what we need to do is put these management structures in place, and that's where I'll be assisting Alan in order to get them. So we have there has been a significant amount of work done, and there is just a few management issues, and then obviously the day-to-day management. What we have agreed also is that following the prohibition order being lifted, and then we're going to revisit the fire risk assessment periodically once we get guests within the building again, because obviously that changes matters. So that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you, Ian. And then I'd like to introduce Mr. Diamond. And if Mr. Diamond, if you could very briefly just give the chair and councillors a little summary of where you've been in the last couple of years, what's happened with the hotel, the investment you've put into it, and how you see it going forward.
Okay. Bought the hotel in 2017 and had a stroke in 2018, which delayed everything a bit, and was hospital for a while. So everything got delayed, and the work's not been done. The works that need to be done have been done now, but at the time they weren't done. I admit myself, at the time when the fire risk assessor come round, it was very dodgy. Everything was up in the air. I need more. That's why I said I need more help. I've got the help now I need, so I'm able to take it forward, open up a hotel with entertainment and everything for guests.
And that's where we are really at the moment, Chair and Councillors. The work's been undertaken. Mr. Diamond's health has improved, thankfully. There will be continued investment in terms of financial investment, management support, and independent consultancy going forward. So as I said earlier, if you were minded to grant the application, potentially with the addition of 2 conditions. The first one being that no licensable activity shall take place until any prohibition notices are lifted and the fire safety and health and safety departments receive certification to that effect. And another one regarding potentially independent fire safety and health and safety consultants to be employed by the PLH. Thank you.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. Mr. Petrak, do you have any questions to Mr. Daly, Mr. Diamond, or Mr. Smith?
I do, please, Chair. Firstly, thank you guys for just filling a few gaps there, so I understand a little bit more about who's doing what. Just a couple of things that I do just want to clarify, though, on top of that is in relation to, I guess, everyone who's assisting Mr. Diamond at the moment. What's the long-term plan with that? Because with the greatest of respect, you guys aren't going to be around forever, are you, in relation to assisting Mr. Diamond with his hotel? There's going to be a cut-off point, and bearing in mind the issues that we've got, certainly from the past, relate to the management of the premises. So if maybe one of you could, at a time, could just sort of clarify that situation for me, that would be helpful.
We did have a conversation about this, and I fully appreciate your concerns because I mean, I'm just contracted for this initial hearing. But I know Mr. Smith is contracted long term. So in terms of the long term fire safety compliance, Mr. Smith has been contracted to supervise that. In terms of licensing compliance, I would be happy to do that, but we haven't had a discussion around that, myself and Mr. Diamond. And then in terms of health and safety, I don't believe anyone has been appointed as yet, but equally, if the committee were minded to grant and it became a condition on the license, then there would obviously be that legally binding compliant condition. If that was set with certain dates and times, it wouldn't be, I don't believe from the conversations I've had with Mr. Diamond that there would be any issues there, or it would be contested. I think that is fully acknowledged that. And that's going back to the Mitchells and Butlers days. You know, we used to run these premises for the big companies, but there was that overarching support, and going from a managed house to an independent chain. And you know, I've worked for independents as well, and you do recognise that having that support is necessary, especially for a hotel of the size of the Coastal Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just in terms of your role, I appreciate yours is around the fire risk assessments and what have you. I just wondered what the normal time frame would be for undertaking the sort of work that you've been asked to do for Mr. Diamond, and how long it's taken in this case.
Well, You mean to get it to where we'd
Yeah,
be able to
yeah,
get the
I'm not
product
sure
and
how-
all the-
Yes, I'm not sure how long you've been on. I suppose what I'm getting at is that this application was actually accepted by the licensing department on the 28th of June, and it's now the 17th of October. And the notice is, I appreciate you have done a lot of work, because I've spoken to the fire watch manager this morning and he's told me you have. But we're still not in a place where this premises can be legally opened.
Well, I
So
don't
just
see
wondering-
it being, based on my experience, and I've got a lot of experience dealing within the hospitality, I know exactly what needs to be positioned. Once we get that management structure in place, I think that Alan will be fine with, I mean, we've done 3 fire risk assessments at the moment, and it will be revisited periodically as and when. And as a consultant, now Alan's taken that on board, I'll be there to assist him whenever he needs it. So, but actually getting this structure into place should be quite straightforward, and then it's just the day-to-day management. What we've done is not just the risk assessment which we've assisted. So what we've done is built a compliance file where all the testing and ongoing testing, so weekly tests of the fire alarm, the stuff that needs to be done on a day-to-day basis of a hotel is all being done at the moment. So, and that's where the consultancy's already happened, and it is happening. What we need to do from a management perspective is say an evacuation procedure, that sort of thing, and designate. So obviously, when the hotel opens, people will be given individual responsibilities of what to do in the event of a fire, and it's that sort of thing that we're just trying to bring together, which is quite straightforward from my perspective. Obviously, I provided the fire risk assessment for Alan, but fire safety is my expertise, and I'm not just one to give you a fire risk assessment and say, off you pop, you crack on. And that's where I'm trying to help Alan to get some understanding of that. And I'm quite confident that once we've got that in place, he should be fine just to do the day-to-day running of it, monthly running of it.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Thank you. So it does to a certain degree. So bearing in mind what you've said there, do we know, I suppose 2 questions spring to mind. Is it too early for us to say what that management structure is going to look like? And depending on the answer to that, how long is that going to take?
I wouldn't like to put a specific time scale on it. It's depending on how long we want to work. I mean, we could get that within the management structure within a week, but obviously once we get more staff on board, they're going to be given specific responsibilities. One of the main issues within the fire risk assessment was the training side of it. Now that's been, because obviously there was no formal fire training that has taken place. Alan's taken that on board, and he's had the formal fire training, so he's got some fire awareness training now, which historically he didn't, and I prioritise that as a high priority, because if you don't know what you're doing, then it's ultimately the management side of it is going to fall flat, isn't it? So fundamentally, that's what we need to pick up, in addition to all the statutory compliance and the fabric of the building as well.
Okay. So just for absolute clarity, then, that general, I think what I'm getting here is that at the moment we don't know how many staff we're going to have. We don't know who's going to have responsibility for what, but you're going to assist Mr. Diamond in identifying exactly that. But I guess in terms of overall management responsibility of it, it's presumably going to be Mr. Diamond, is it not?
Yeah. Alan's the responsible person, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I have no more questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Coleman?
Thanks, Chair. I'm a little bit in ignorance if Mr. Smith could just clarify the 20% of the building has now been looked into, and it's going to take 5 years. Mr. Smith, could you just explain a little bit more about that, please? I wasn't quite
what
that means. Sorry.
What you can either, there's 2 ways to attend to the electrical safety. is you can put it on a 5-year rolling program. So rather than do 100% test of the building, do a 20% test and then all the associated remedial work to gain the certificate of compliance. So what we'll do for the hotel is that there's an observation of the full system, and then you get coded remedial work. So if there's anything glaringly obvious, so for example, a socket hanging off, that would be coded as an observation and a code 1, so it would require immediate attention. So that's been done, and now it's onto a 5-year rolling program of test and inspect, which will be done every year, so that there's 100% observation of the system and a 20% test of the circuitry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And could you just explain the levels of, I mean, we've heard the tolerable and sort of, was it moderate level? How many levels are they, please?
So there's tolerable, a moderate, and then there's intolerable. So the highest level is where it was at, yeah? So now, given there was lots and lots of work to do, so it's not subject to me actually, you know, making that decision. It's an algorithm within the software on the basis of what I deem the risk to be, and the risk in this case now is successfully reduced to a moderate risk. However, the Fire Off Authority are looking to get it to a tolerable risk.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sloman.
Oh, hello. I was going to ask similarly about the 20%. So when we're talking about a 20% rolling programme, are we starting at a position of 100% compliance and then reviewing 20%?
No, sorry. Basically, what we've done is it's compliant in terms of the work at the Electricity at Work Act, the regulations. The building is currently compliant. So there's a certificate of compliance on 20% of the building. It's quite acceptable under those regs to do it this way, and it's quite common to do it this way. Because I tend to agree with this, that if you was to complete 100% test, and then people just say, well, we don't need to do anything for 5 years now, but by doing it this way, we can capture anything for the 100% observations within the next year's test as well. And especially with, say, hotels and schools and that sort of thing, with being very busy, things do happen. So it's a better way of doing it rather than just forget it for 5 years, because things do happen.
Yeah, I was just concerned that you were doing it from a position of compliance to begin with. I sort of understood it to be that you were just looking at 20% of the building at the beginning, and if you're going to be using 100% of the building, that would seem a bit odd to me. The other thing I'd like to ask, probably a personal question, I don't know whether I can ask it or not, social care background, so we always have to ask the question about the family. Would you be happy with your family to book into the hotel as is?
Me personally, is that directed at me?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. You're the expert in fire safety. Would you consider your family safe staying in the hotel as it is today, if we were to grant a licence?
Well, not until we've attended to the management side, because what we need to do is be able to get people out of the building. So once we've got that, then I've got no issue. Everything is certificated by competent contractors. So in terms of the fabric of the building, yes. Once we've got the management structure in place, then yes.
Okay, and just one final thing really about training. We're saying that we're going to give or delegate particular responsibilities for particular staff that are going to be employed as, you know, sort of domestic staff, as waiting staff, things like that, aren't necessarily going to have any expertise. Can you tell me what you would propose in terms of the level of training that would be offered to the staff that are going to have delegated responsibilities?
It would be key members of staff, and they will get fire marshal training, then localised training within the building, so an awareness of where the exit routes are, where the assembly point is, that sort of thing. How to sound the alarm, what to do in the event of fire. So there's two sides of it. You can have a formal training, which would be fire marshal training, then obviously that's quite generic, and we need to adapt that then to localised training, so an induction training to talk to the staff through where everything is, what we do, and this is how we do it. And then that is then practiced through fire drills. So I suggest to do a fire drill if you've not got a live situation. The law says you do a 6-monthly evacuation drill, sleeping accommodation, and particularly hotels where people have maybe consumed alcohol, that sort of thing. It's good practice to do a quarterly one of them, and that's how you gauge whether your management system is working.
And in part of that management system, then would there always be somebody on duty at the hotel that has had some, you know, more extended training than, you know, your local induction training?
The fire marshal training.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite common that if you used to have a night porter on, he would have both those. He'd have formal fire marshal training, and every member of staff would have the localized induction training, and then your key members of staff would have official fire marshal training. It's also good practice to have fire awareness training for every member of staff as well. So you can do that you can do it online, or you can do it formally within the building. He's got rooms to have an official trainer in there anyway.
Right. And would the formal fire marshal training, is that certificated or overseen by any regulatory body that you're aware of, please?
Yeah, that will be. Yes, it is, and that includes. See, fire awareness training is a very basic, but the fire marshal training, it spells out what responsibilities and what you've got, and then it also includes a discharge of a fire extinguisher, what to use, what not to use on certain pieces of equipment, so electrics and that sort of thing. So it's a lot more in depth. Right.
So it's a practical based thing. It's not just somebody sitting in front of a camera.
It's both. No,
right.
No. It's both. There is hands-on, and then there is. It's good to do it on site, because then you can actually look at the actual building as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I've got a few questions, and these are directed at Mr. Diamond, because we haven't heard a lot from him, and that worries me, because he's the gentleman who's actually going to be in charge of this on a day-to-day basis, and we haven't heard a lot from him. Mr. Diamond, you knew that there was a prohibition notice on this building for some time, yet you put the application in before you had most of the work carried out. Why did you do it that way? Why didn't you get the work done? Because it would have saved an awful lot of time and hassle if you'd have actually done the work or got the work done. And this, according to what I've read, some of this work was done months after you put the application in. And it just seems to me that that's just a little bit back to front.
It is, yeah. I got it wrong, to be fair. That's why I got advice now with most people, because I was open to put the application in, and I thought everything would be done, but that was wrong to me.
That raises a question in my mind as to, you got that wrong. How much of this documentation, which is still not in place, you've had the application in since the 22nd of June, I think.
Yeah.
Why is this documentation not already in place? Because we just seem to be going backwards and backwards all the time.
It's because the fire officer was meant to come. He come once, but he couldn't get, the work wasn't done. So it's everything going backwards and forwards. The fire officer, but now the fire officer is booked again for the 28th, I think it is.
But some of this paperwork that we're now being told needs to be done could have been done before.
It should have been.
You didn't need the fire officer to come in to actually get this paperwork done, did you?
No.
So you're now asking us to take a punt and say, yes, we'll grant the licence with these conditions on. And what worries me is, what guarantee can you give us as an authority that, you know, you've breached the rules before? What guarantee, what assurance can you give this panel, and conversely the authority, that that we won't be seeing these breaches in the future?
I've got help now. I've got people like Ian going to be there, and what's his name, the solicitor being there. They've got help now. I didn't have help before. I was trying to do it myself, but I've got help now. So that it's not just me now, it's other people. And going forward, I might employ a manager, experienced manager for the hotel.
Right. I'm not sure if that reassures me or not. Okay, then. Are there any further questions from members of the committee or Mr. Petrak? Sorry, Councillor Coleman, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Can we just clarify the opening till 5 a.m. in the morning? Is that residents only, or is that just open to public?
No, residents only.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Diamond, obviously, notwithstanding what you've told us before, and operating and the terrible comments that your hotel received previously, and the effect that the negative effects, I don't know, on Blackpool as a whole. How long would you have kept operating in that situation if you didn't have to suspend operations? How long would you have kept on going? Because I think there was 10 things that was needed to be fixed, and I think there was one after a time. But you kept going, and it seems I don't know. I don't know whether you knew it was unsafe or not, but the building stayed open, and it was an interesting question from Councillor Sloman that would you be happy for your family to stay there? And as the chair just mentioned, we have all this paperwork in front of us, and sometimes it's the human element as well that isn't written down here. And of course, it's your good self. And I don't know. I think we struggle. We're struggling. Can you tell us anything to give us confidence in you, please, sir?
The problems arose not because of me, because I rented the hotel out to a company called Blackpool Hub, and they were putting guests in. That's the problem. Arose because of them, not because of me. I was party to it. I let them get away with it, obviously, but I didn't know. They told me we're pack alive. To be fair, they said because the hotel had transferred to them, the prohibition notice wasn't valid and everything. They could have guests. I told them they had copies of the prohibition notice, but they just took it for themselves to put people in the hotel.
Yeah, thank you. But what actions did you actually take apart from just telling them? And for how long did it continue?
I threw them out. I basically terminated the lease. That's why I got rid of them.
Was that the termination of the lease, or did you end the lease before the original, the actual date you'd agreed on?
We ended the lease before they were meant to be here for 2 years. But as soon as this all started and all this kicked off, that was it. I terminated the lease straight away. So my solicitor, I've got my sister involved. He terminated their lease.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sloman, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just one again for Mr. Diamond. Obviously, we've got to consider the reputation of this town. That's why we're sat here. There are a lot of damning reviews previously about the hotel, and I noticed that you've done all this work that you're supposed to do. Has there been an upgrading of the property elsewhere? You know, the hotel rooms, the carpets that were referred
to. The carpets have all been rechanged, the beds have all been replaced, all the painting's been done. I've spent loads of money on the hotel on the actual fabrication of the building, on top of all the fire safety stuff as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Petrak, do you want to come back on anything that's been said? No? Right, thank you. In that case, then, Mr. Petrak, it's your opportunity to explain to the committee your views on this and whether or not the licence should be granted.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll assume everyone's seen those representations that I've made in writing that relate to the historical issues regarding these particular premises and Mr. Diamond's involvement in them. And that clearly isn't disputed. The facts are the facts. We're here because of previous failings and the status of the premises during the time this application has been made, which I said earlier was as long ago as the 28th of June now, and we're nearly 4 months on. And whilst some progress has clearly been made, we're not in a position where the premises can legally be opened. And I'll clarify what exactly what I mean by that in a moment. So clearly we are talking about issues that, without any doubt, affect the licensing objectives in relation to public safety. Clearly a very serious consideration for the licensing authority and of course for this committee. And I've had many conversations with health and safety colleagues and the fire service regarding the status of these premises, and we can say that some progress has been made. That I think that's obvious. But I do have a slight concern. Well, I think it's probably more than a slight concern that the progress that's been made has not been due to Mr. Diamond. I think Mr. Daly and Mr. Smith have been extremely helpful this morning. But what happens when they're no longer there? Those consultancy services will not last forever, unless, of course, Mr. Diamond has an infinite pot of money to be able to continue to pay them. And there is, just like I said, there clearly has been progress, and that marries up with what the fire service told me. I spoke to the fire service watch manager this morning, and they told me that the risk is still above a tolerable risk. It's medium, which we heard Mr. Smith say that earlier on. And the fire service have informed me that the physical elements are all in place. And again, we've heard that from Mr. Smith this morning. However, the fire service view is that risk cannot be reduced or will not be reduced to tolerable until they have seen proper evidence that there is proper management in the premises. And again, Mr. Smith has said exactly the same about the structure of management, whose responsibilities are going to lie where. But ultimately, Mr. Diamond's going to be responsible for all of that, which again causes me some slight concern, given the history and where we are today. Until that is done, then there will be no movement from the fire service. And they told me that I'm not sure what I think Mr. Diamond mentioned before, something booked in for the 28th. I'm not sure what that is. The fire service told me that there was no point in revisiting the premises until there is evidence of proper management in place. So as far as the watch manager is concerned, there's no point in going anywhere near those premises until they've seen that. And as I say, we're nearly 4 months on and this still hasn't been resolved. So which takes me also to a point which Mr. Daly, I think quite rightly did say, he's offered 2 conditions, one of which relates to the premises not being operated until such time as that prohibition notice has been, risk has been lowered. Well, it can't be anyway. If he does open it before then, he commits an offence for which the fire service will deal with that. So it's it may know where we are, and I think the only thing that I can say, it may be a moot point, but I think it's one that the committee needs to be aware. So the committee at this point, which is a consideration that I think is relevant, is if the committee feel as though that Mr. Diamond gives them the confidence they need that he is able to operate and manage these premises in a way which will keep the public safe, then absolutely a license should be granted. But if they have any doubt about that, then clearly the license shouldn't be granted. And that is, for me, the simplest way that I can put this. I really don't think there's anything else that I can add at this point. I think it's relatively black and white for us in terms of what the issues are. So I guess I'm sure there'll be some questions from the committee and perhaps Mr. Diamond, his representative. So I welcome them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Petrak. Mr. Daly, Mr. Diamond, Mr. Smith, do you have any questions to anything that Mr. Petrak said so far today?
No, there's no questions from me.
Right. Mr. Daly?
No questions as such. I think I'd reserve it potentially for closing points.
All right. Mr. Diamond, do you have any questions to Mr. Petrak? No? Do members of the committee have any questions to Mr. Petrak? Councillor Sloman?
No.
No. Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Petrak, what sort of, how many hours has actually gone into overseeing Mr. Diamond's operations so far? I mean, there must be quite a lot of costs incurred with reviewing and keep coming back to this. Would you have any idea how many sort of hours have gone into this so far, please?
I don't, Councillor, I'm afraid. It's not something that I can quantify. All I can say is that at the time I was clearly aware and was involved in the original proceedings from 2019 thereabouts, and there was an awful lot of Blackpool Council time involved from in relation to my colleagues in health and safety at the time, because there were numerous visits, there were numerous notices that had been served, and each notice needs to be followed up to see if it's been complied with. So I'm aware that there was an awful lot of council time spent at that time. It's been less time from my point of view, because of course I'm dealing with the applications and essentially collecting the information together from those other sources. So as far as the fire service are concerned, I'm not too sure how much time there's been put in by them, but clearly there will have been a certain amount. But it's not a question that I can answer or even attempt to answer, unfortunately. Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Mr. Petrak. Well, you've given us some sort of idea and a flavour, but no, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, I don't have any questions for Mr. Petrak. In that case, we now come to summing up, and is this where Mr. Petrak goes first? I know he went first.
Yeah, Mr. Petrak goes first, yeah.
Right, Mr. Petrak, it's your opportunity if you want to come back and.
Yeah, I think I'd just be repeating myself, Chair. I think the last part of my submissions is how I'd want to sum up essentially, which is in relation to Mr. Diamond and the confidence that he would give to the committee and the licensing authority that he can operate these premises whilst satisfying and promoting all of the licensing objectives. If you feel as though that you've heard enough this morning to satisfy you that he is somebody who can do that, then there should be no concerns for any of us, and the license should be granted. But if that isn't the case, then clearly the license should not be granted. And I can't really summarise in any other way than that, I'm afraid, Chair. So I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Petrak. Mr. Daly, do you want to sum up with Mr. Diamond and Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to sum up, I think in terms of the potential cost that this has to the authority over a period of time, I think that's balanced somewhat by the investment that's gone into the building and the potential economic benefits to the town as a whole. I think everyone would rather see this premises to have a license in place to allow licensable activity. If the license isn't granted and the prohibition notice is lifted, it will be able to operate in a similar fashion, just without the sale of alcohol, regulated entertainment and late night refreshments. So I think it's important to determine that this license isn't to determine whether the premise is safe or subject to a prohibition notice. It's about how will those licensable activities impact on the premises. Having them at the premises will ensure that it can be of a benefit to the local economy and encourage tourism to the local area. I think in terms of what Mr. Petrak said about, and he's quite right, how long will things be in place in terms of from a consultancy point of view? I think that having consultants in place to assist Mr. Diamond will of course be a benefit to him, to guests, and probably give some reassurance to the licensing authority as well. As I stated, there are conditions that you could put in place to ensure that they become legally enforceable and part of the license. Again, if they weren't adhered to in the future, the premises could be subject to review, and I have no doubt that if this premises did go to review again, I can imagine what the committee's decision would be very shortly. In terms of what you said, Councillor Hutton, in terms of taking a punt on the premises, to an extent there are some unknowns here, but I would reinforce the point that you have at your disposal conditions which would assist in upholding the licence objectives to ensure that there is independent supervision of the premises. And then finally, Councillor Sloman, I've done a few hearings, but that was an excellent question in terms of would you let your family stay there? I think that probably sums the whole thing up, really. And I kind of balked a little bit and thought, oh God, what's Mr. Smith going to say? And he's, you know, over a conversation with Mr. Smith this morning, and we both discussed the fact that neither of us want, from point of view of my business or his business, neither of us want to be associated with a premises where we will come in and then immediately walk away and it'll all go to disrepair. And in the, you know, that's not what we're here to do. If either of us are appointed to assist from a licensing consultancy point of view, health and safety and fire safety is not my bag at all. I won't even pretend that it is. But I know from speaking to Mr. Smith that if he undertakes the role of supervision of this in a consultancy capacity, he will do it properly. And I think the answer was he wouldn't let his family stay there now, but in terms of when those additional structures are in place and he's overseeing it, then yes, he wouldn't. I think that kind of sums up where we are.
Okay, Mr. Diamond, is there anything you just want to say in as a final word?
Just to reiterate the fact that in the past I've made mistakes. I've not assistance needed, but now I've got assistance needed and help I've got now, so I'm able to move the building forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
In that case, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this morning. The committee with the advisors will discuss it, come to a decision. As I say, you will be notified within 5 working days. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Then, can I ask people to leave the meeting at this stage?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Bye.